I'm Pamela Major, and I am going to be your moderator this evening. On behalf of Springwood Avenue Rising and Interfaith Neighbors, we just want to say thank you so much for coming to the first of 3 roundtable discussions. We will be having our second one on March 10th at the Lumley Social Room, and it will be on the presence of men, and we'll be having our final one on Juneteenth, and it will be about the power of community. But tonight, we are talking about the importance of preserving history. And we have an amazing panel who you're going to hear from them, you're going to hear who they are. If you don't know who they are, if people knew the power of this panel, we would have standing room only in here. But fortunately, because of APTV, they will be able to see it. And I am just looking forward to everything that's going to be shared tonight. But we have a special guest from the past that's going to greet us first. And then after that, we're going to get into the panel. So I would like to welcome Ms. Sojourner Truth.
Well, children, where there's so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. Now, what is all this here talk about anyway? Now, that man over there, he said women ought to be lifted over mud puddles and helped in the carriages and give the best place everywhere. Well, don't nobody ever help me into no wagon or carry me over no mud puddles or give me no best place. And I, woman, look at my arm. I have plowed and gathered in the barns and no man could have me. I could work as much as a man and eat as much too when I could get it. And I, a woman, I have borne 5 children and feared to see them all sold off into slavery. And when I cried out of my mother's anguish, none but Jesus heard me. And I'll die a woman. Then they talk about this thing. Then they talk about this thing in their head. The intellect. That's it. Intellect. Now, what's that got to do with women's rights or niggas' rights either? If your cup hold a quart and mine don't hold but a pint, wouldn't you be mean not to give me my little half measure full? Ooh. And that little man over there. That little man over there, he said, women can't have as much rights as men. Because Christ was a woman. Well, where did your Christ come from? Now, I say, where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman that had nothing to do with you. Now I think if the first woman God ever put on this earth could take it and turn it upside down, all these women here, all together, while they ought to be able to take it and turn it right side up again. And now that they're asking, well, you men's better let them. Now that's all I got to say. Oh, Sojourner, thank you for letting me share on you. Thank you.
Now, that is just the beginning of what we're going to share tonight. Again, the importance of preserving history. And so we're going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves and let you know a little bit about them. And then we're going to go on a little bit of a journey to talk about history. So I guess I'll start right here with Dr. Caro Penn.
All right. So good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Dr. Major. And hello to my fellow panelists, and thank you, Sojourner. It's wonderful to see you again in this lifetime, my dear.
It's my pleasure to be here, Doctor.
Yes, so I'm Dr. Caro Penn. I'm a fourth-generation Red Banker, native Red Banker. I grew up in this area. My grandfather lived down the street on Bangs Avenue, my paternal grandfather, so I spent a lot of time here in Asbury Park as a child. I am currently doubly board certified in family medicine and obesity medicine. I'm a 3-time best-selling author. I'm also a master meditation mindset and movement coach. I have my own concierge practice. Right now, we're located in Fort Monmouth, and I also consider myself, particularly since the murder of George Floyd, as a bit of an activist. I've been doing programming and traveling across the country. Currently have a continuing medical education course for African American doctors, dealing with topics around diversity, equity, and inclusion, among other things, such as their burnout and the cost of being a Black professional in America. I'm just thrilled to be here tonight and delighted to be in one of my home communities. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dantele Jones. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a councilwoman at the Borough of Eatontown. And this is my 3rd year of my first term. I am a Eatontown resident. That's where I grew up. My family has lived there since 1991, and I am a proud graduate of the public school system there. I am also a member of the New Jersey Amistad Commission. I was appointed to that commission in 2022 in June. I've completed 2 fellowships for leadership, one through New Leaders Council in 2021, and just this December completed Leadership New Jersey, and one of the most famous alums of that program is Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver, so it is an honor to be able to complete that program. I do a lot of work on voter education, voter engagement, especially in light of what happened with the recent midterm elections. It's important for me to empower millennials and Gen Z, basically younger adults, to become civically engaged, find what issue that you are passionate about or you want to see a change in, and be empowered to do that. And I like to see myself as a bridge and a mentor to help bridge the gap between communication between intergenerations. Because sometimes younger adults feel that older adults don't listen to them. And sometimes the older adults feel like the younger adults are just pointing the fingers, trying to put blame on somebody. So I try to be that mediator and help bridge the communication. And that's a little bit of what I do. I'm also a graduate student. I should be done with my master's degree prayerfully by December of this year. And it's just a pleasure to be here, and a pleasure to be of service.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Stone. Now I'm retired sojourner for the moment. But as I just said to my councilwoman, because I do live in Eatontown. I'm gonna get to that. I'm gonna get to that. This is our season, and for probably everybody else sitting at this table, I consider from Kwanzaa till Women's History Month, folk are calling on us to do something, to talk about something, to talk to somebody, to be somebody. So we will be around, and I want to see a lot more people, especially young people, who are learning about their history. We need to see them. They need to see us and be here, wherever here may be. Yes, Kay, I am a product of Asbury Park. This is my hometown. I was at my home church today for a sad reason. It was a funeral. But Bethlehem Church is where I was taken first as a child and was there probably every Sunday. until I went off to college. Thank you, Jesus, for Hampton Institute. But I am a performance artist. I do portrayals of African American women, some that you know of, Sojourner and Harriet, you know. Mary Bowser, you probably don't know. And Elizabeth Jennings, you probably don't know. Elizabeth Jennings made history in New York City, but she lived in Eatontown for a time. So there is so much history that we don't know, right, T? Yeah. And you got to hang out with some of us, and we're going to bring a lot more of it to you. Okay.
I'm Kay Harris, a product of Asbury Park school system, graduated class of 1970. And after retiring from AT&T in management, I became an entrepreneur. So many of you are probably aware that I do own a business on the boardwalk in Asbury Park. And one of my goals is to see more representation of us on the boardwalk of Asbury Park, or in general, period. So I am a member of the New Jersey Pan-African Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Asbury Park Chamber of Commerce. I am the president of the Asbury Park Historical Society and president and founder of the Asbury Park Museum. And I'm very proud of that because that's an opportunity for us to really share the broad, diverse history of Asbury Park and not just, like the music. And when I say music, we have our rich history of music from Springwood Avenue, as we're aware, but nationally we seem to be on the map because of Bruce Springsteen. And we're so happy about that, but I just want to make sure the folks know that we're more than just that genre of music. And there's so much history, so we're excited. In fact, Lorraine is one of our board members, and so we're excited for the many opportunities that we have to do that. And I think that's about it for now.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gilde Rogers, and I am the executive director of the T. Thomas Fortune Cultural Center in Red Bank. I am also a history professor at Brookdale Community College. I am the community relations manager for Two River Theater. So those are the many hats that I wear. And my main hat, basically, is the T. Thomas Fortune Cultural Center, which I led the group of which Lorraine was a part of to save that home. And that home was the home of a very prominent African-American journalist by the name of T. Thomas Fortune, who lived there between 1901 and 1911. T. Thomas Fortune has been called the bridge to the modern day civil rights movement. Many people have never heard of him, but through the Cultural Center, his spirit and his work has been resurrected, and but I'm glad to see that media picked him up, and he's a character now featured in the HBO series, The Gilded Age. I formerly worked for a number of years at the Asbury Park Press as a reporter. And I still write. I've written a few books. And I'm always glad to share the history, because if we don't, we know what happens, right? If we didn't step in to save the T. Thomas Fortune house, which now that Red Bank, the demographics have changed. So it's predominantly a Latinx community. And when I first moved to Red Bank back in the early 90s, on the west side of Red Bank, it was predominantly all Black. And so if the T. Thomas Fortune Cultural Center was not there at this particular moment, it would be as though African-American people had not existed, did not exist, and were not viable in Red Bank. So this is what makes my day, to be able to preserve and then serve up this history for everybody that wants to know. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you. So I didn't say anything about me except for my name. I'm Pamela Major. I am part of Springwood Avenue Rising, who is part of hosting and developing and remembering Springwood Avenue. Springwood Avenue was burned down in 1970, 4th of July weekend. This was something that lasted for approximately a week. And there are many reasons, there are many ideas, depending on whose side you're on, that, that will tell you what your story is going to be. But the bottom line is, it was burned down. And it now has been built back up and is being built back up, but it is very different from what it was. And without the people who shared history, who took photographs, who wrote books, we would not know what it was that existed. Without some of the work, quite honestly, that we did by recording people whose history would have been forgotten, we're able to preserve that and we're able to tell the story. So who am I? I'm a transplant. I am from Bergen County. I'm from Englewood, New Jersey. And through a conversation with Diane Shelton, I said, it's almost 50 years since this occurrence. So, what should we do? And we got to talking about it. We developed Springwood Avenue Rising, and we are looking, if anybody that's here that wants to be a part, we are certainly, anybody that's doing that wants to be a part, we certainly would love to have you be on the Springwood Avenue Rising Committee. Me, I have a history of children. I started babysitting at 7, and so then I decided to become a teacher ultimately, and I have been advocating for children ever since. And now I am on my own, my business, Malia Bloom, where we coach, train, teach, and share and help build people up. We build people, places, and purpose. And so, you have that need? I think you probably know how to find me, right? So tonight, without any further ado, we are going to hear from our magnificent panel. Can we have another hand for the panel? Because I don't know where you can get this type of panel. We're just very, very blessed for it. So, first question. And as many people as want to answer this one, please do. We'd love to hear from everybody, actually. Why is preserving history important to you?
It's important to me. I've always loved history. Ever since I was a child, that it came easy for me. I enjoyed always reading about people, biographies, and learning about people. So it's in my DNA that I love history because it's important, because it lets us know where we came from and where it is that we're going or trying to get to. And it also gives us the history of who we are as people and how we have progressed and maybe regressed. So I think when you really study history, you learn about us, learn about yourselves, and you have a starting point. You have a starting point.
Thank you.
I, as I said, was a child in Bethel AME Church, and in Bethel Church, there was a woman named Teresa V. Hall. Now, when we were children, we swore Miss Hall was already 120. She was just old, but Teresa V. Hall knew every poem that Paul Laurence Dunbar had written in dialect. I never saw that woman with a book or a piece of paper. And that began my love of history, because Dunbar, when he was writing in dialect particularly, was telling the story of his people, how they spoke, how they ate, how they went to a party. I love that poem, The Party, because it lays it all out. And from there, I started doing research because I became what was called a performance poet. I didn't know that's what it was. But looking at what James Weldon Johnson wrote, looking everywhere I could to see who had written about my people. Because in school, there was not a lot of information there. Most of us who went to Bangs Avenue School, and I went to Bangs and I also went to Ridge Avenue School, we had teachers that looked like us. That was the joy of Springwood Avenue, talking about holding on to a history. I went to school Monday through Friday, and I saw my teachers, and they were Black. And then on Saturday, I would go shopping with my mother, M&B Market and wherever else we were on Springwood Avenue, and my teachers would be there shopping. And then we went to church on Sunday, teachers would be in church. So that is a history that is all but lost right here in Asbury Park. Too many children don't know anything except there was a fire and Springwood Avenue burned down. I call Springwood Avenue our Tulsa because, okay, it didn't have a movie theater and it may not have had as many businesses, but it was a thriving economic base for the Black community in Asbury Park. We honored it and it honored us. From roasted peanuts to live chickens. I sent my mother to the chicken market one day to give me chicken feed. I didn't know. I still don't know why. But to hold on through those of us in this room and our elders, those who are still holding on, to extract the knowledge. We must extract the knowledge and find ways to hold on to it, to pass it to our children, to keep it within ourselves, and to speak of it, make it a part of our lives, so that when we talk, we're not just talking about BET and MTV and Rihanna and Janet and then da. Now, they're wonderful, but I'm older than them, so they ain't holding the history. We, who understand the importance of the history, must hold the history and then share it.
Yes.
And to add to that, I think learning and appreciating our history is so important because beyond the brick and mortar, we need to remember those who predated us. Who are the people who came before us? And there's so many prominent people like, Willie Ham, William Knuckles, Walter Upperman, who was an attorney back in the day, Louise Hughes, and then you had Hunt's Funeral Home, you had Leon Harris, Danny Harris, Lorenzo Harris. Yeah, and so beyond the national network, just on a local basis, I think it's so important to kind of know who these folks are. And why they were important, and what are the things that they did for us. And also why it's important to preserve the history is so that we kind of recognize how that pendulum goes back and forth, and that, you have the high days and the low days, and we may be on the upswing in some respects, but you have to be mindful that can always go back the other way again. So you have to be mindful of that. And, so I think those are some of the reasons just to start that are important to me. Anybody else?
Well, I'll say that, and so thank you for the wisdom that has been spoken into the room already. But there's the quote, and the essence of the quote is, those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past. And we're living that right now, where so many of us don't know our history. So for me, the preservation of history is important because, I don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Another person said that, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome is the definition of insanity. And I think we're seeing a lot of insanity right now. Again, we seem to be very hard-headed and stubborn about really wanting to dig down and know our history. And I know from my childhood, my love of history, the seeds were planted by my grandmother, who would go down to the Red Bank Library. We would get anything and everything, and she would just read to me, and just read and read and read. And I became fascinated about these stories from all over the world and how important it was in shaping the present and shaping the future. And the thing that I have taken from that, and that has carried with me throughout my life, is that we are the history, we are the living history, and all of our stories are important. It's very important that everyone in this room start to write their stories down, their family stories down, because the history that's going to create the platform and the community that I want to live in, if I am to have a future as an elder, is the history that we're going to create in this room. Somebody else is not going to do it for us. The history and the story that's waiting to be told is going to be written by the person sitting in your seat this evening.
Amen.
My perspective is a little different. I
Turn your mic around.
Thank you. I actually, when I originally went to school, I was a history and secondary education major. I love history, but I really cared more about social movements, but I still saw the value of US history and world history. But where was African American history? Where was LGBTQ plus history? Where was Asian American Pacific Islander history? Like all the different stories. And even though I eventually got my degree in psychology, I still study history. And especially when I transitioned into government and politics, it was really important for me to understand history. Because when I hear, this isn't us, why are we doing this? I'm like, but have you gone back in history? You see that there's patterns, but if we're not learning from them and not wanting to face the truth in said history, we are doomed to repeat them. And my goal and my prayer is that I can empower young adults to study the history, not so much to point fingers at people, but what can we do differently? We don't have to make the same mistakes. We can make different mistakes, but we don't have to repeat the same mistakes that have been made in the past. But if you don't study that history, how do you learn from it? How do you grow from it? How do you move forward? One of the reasons why I wanted to become a member of the Amistad Commission is I didn't find out until I was sworn into office at age 39 that there was a documented lynching in the state of New Jersey. It took place in Eatontown. How did I not know that going through the Eatontown school district and living in Eatontown since I was 9 years old? How did I not know about that? So another important part for me is who gets to determine what history is being taught? And I need to make this very clear because I don't want people that have certain privileges to be ashamed or embarrassed by them. It's okay to have them, just don't weaponize them. Don't weaponize those privileges to keep other people down. Because when you keep one group down, you're keeping everybody down. And you're also hurting yourself. So how do we work together so that if one group rises, everybody rises? And I may not have racial privilege as a person of color or gender privilege as a woman and female identified person, but I don't have a physical disability. I grew up in an upper middle class home. There are other ways I can advocate, and when I'm in those rooms where decisions are made, I can advocate for those who don't have a seat at the table.
but I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't have a very solid historical background and foundation, and that's why I believe preserving history is important.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, here's probably a tougher question because you have to try to pull this all in, right? What are the 1 to 2 most significant events in history to you?
I don't mind going first. The first time I ever voted in any election was Bush versus Gore in 2000.
You took my number 1. Go ahead.
And I didn't understand because I was just excited to vote. I was like, I'm 18, woohoo! But I didn't understand how tightly contested that vote was, how it went to the Supreme Court, how the Supreme Court actually made the decision of who was going to become president, and how that shifted and changed the projection of who could become president of the United States of America. I didn't get it. Now, looking back, I'm like, oh my goodness, look at all these different factors, which goes back to preserving history. I also remember 9/11. I was a college student. I happened to be walking through my student center of my college when the planes hit the towers. And I remember we were all thinking, what in God's name is going on? Well, I'm cleaning it up, but what in God's name is going on? And then you started to see all what was going on the federal government, what was going on in the state government, but also in the community, like how people were starting to be suspicious of one another and how people were using stereotypes to say, we don't trust you, we don't like you, I'm not gonna be involved with you or have interactions with you. And I remember thinking, even at that age, I don't know if I like this. But unfortunately, I wasn't confident in myself to say something or do something. And now if you look at where we are 22, actually almost 22 years later, some people were like, well, how did we get here? Well, I could have told you if you had looked at what happened shortly after 9/11. And the one person who voted against invading Iraq was a Black woman and how she was vilified. But we were doing it in a state for the name of security. But if we don't study our history, which she did, and she had the principles to stand out and be like, I'm not morally or for whatever reason, I can't vote with my conscience with this. Now we look at her like, oh my goodness, you saw something, and we celebrate her. But at the time, we weren't. We were like, how could you? We were calling her traitor and everything else. There's so many different things, especially over the past couple of years in light of this pandemic. But those two, especially turning 18, becoming a legal adult, I remember those events very distinctly. And I also look now, that's even though I was a more passive voter and engaged in government, that really is what shaped me and led me to the work I'm doing today.
Okay, I'll jump in now. And actually, I thought you were going to steal mine, but it was actually the election of 2008 with the election of Barack Obama. Because even though that was something we always strive for, and we were so excited that he was running, I don't think any of us really ever expected he would actually win. I mean, and it was just such an, oh my gosh. I mean, everybody was extremely thrilled and excited, and oh my gosh, and we celebrated. And so I would say that was like a turning point. And then we said, wow, like our country has really come a long way for this to happen. And then reality hit us. Because I think a lot of people like, uh-oh, how did this happen? And that's where the pendulum swung the opposite way. Some of the very same people who, because he could not have been elected president if it was just African Americans voting. He was in office because a lot of folks across the country voted him in. But some of those same people who voted him in turned around and went the opposite direction in a whole different, movement. And I don't want to get into politics for tonight, but I think you understand where I'm going. So that's why it's really important. And the reason why it's important to understand history, because then you have to say, well, why were people upset that he won? What were they afraid of? And then that's where you really have to go back into the Reconstruction, like post-emancipation, like, hey, they're free, but then that period with the carpetbaggers and then Reconstruction. So blacks really were doing very well. They owned property, they owned businesses, they were represented in Congress, and had numerous positions. But then that's when they started changing things to make it difficult for blacks to vote, to make sure that that never happened again. Wow, we can't have them moving ahead like that. And very often it might be I don't know how to put it, the lower class whites that maybe were more afraid, people who didn't own property. I don't know how to really describe it tastefully. Those were the ones who were probably most upset by it because they felt like, oh, there has to be some class of people below me, and the fact that they were excelling and doing well, and I'm still doing the same old. So there is that reversal. So I think it's important for us to kind of understand, like, wow, why were people upset that we're making inroads? And I think it kind of goes back to the history of those types of issues. So I'm going to pass the mic to somebody else.
I'm going to say my life has been shaped by historic experiences. And Brown versus the Board of Education, I was not born yet. But let's fast forward 10 years later. I'm a native of Hampton, Virginia. In 1965, in that Brown versus the Board of Education, schools had to integrate by what they said, all deliberate speed. So about 1965, the schools in Virginia were being integrated. And I was a youngster in elementary school, and that year, we had to be bused to an all-white school. And I had always been a great student, but I don't know, something shook. Not something, I know what shook, what shook me. But I remember my mother sitting me down and saying to me, this is an experiment. You have to show these people that you are just as smart, if not smarter. And it wasn't the students, the white students, that were bad. I think I had 3 black students in my class. It was actually the teachers. I remember us going to Williamsburg, Colonial Williamsburg, for a class trip. And I knew enough to know at that age that black people had been slaves, right? So just know this, in 1965, Colonial Williamsburg did not have any representation of enslaved people. So I'm there as a kid and I say to my teacher, well, where are the slaves? And she was like, shh. She shushed me, and I didn't know why. And I go, my mother says, this is my mother has this conversation with me and all of this. So like my world was like what is going on? And then from there, we moved away from Virginia and we moved here to Jersey. But again, I found myself being shaped by things like, obviously, the civil rights movement, but more so I grew up during the Black Power movement. And so things like the killing of Fred Hampton, Nikki Giovanni, Angela Davis, Amiri Baraka. I grew up in Elizabeth. Newark was right next door, so I had access to go to Newark and hear Amiri Baraka, just participate in like Pan-African movements and things like that. So when I think about history, history has been very influencing in my life. Those experiences that I've had. I remember I was always gravitating to, in Elizabeth on the corner, the brothers from the Nation of Islam selling Muhammad Speaks. So it was those kind of things that were like, you know, you wasn't supposed to, even in my own household, being Muslim was not looked upon as something that was, you know, good, all right, acceptable. But I felt something and got something from the rhetoric that I heard them saying. So it's been these kind of moments in history that have profoundly shaped who I am, what I do, and how I go about living my life in service for others.
Well, I have to say, you know, I'm going to go back on that memory bus as well in terms of the historic events that shaped me and impacted me and is still very much a part of my nervous system. So I think it's 1964, and those 4 little girls were bombed in that church basement in Alabama in that September. And I attended AME Zion, Shrewsbury AME Zion Church, and my Sunday school was in a church basement. And I remember, you know, anything that was happening with civil rights, my father in particular, this would be the discussion around the dinner table. And I remember my mother wanting my father to, you know, tone down that story in particular because, you know, those children died and one was blinded. But my father was, no, she's got to know. She's got to know, you know, what her black skin means. So, you know, like when I'm 7 or 8 years old, I think I'm 8. And that story in particular struck me so much because I was relating to the fact that one of the little girls was named Carol. My name is Carol. She was 8. I'm 8. And that's when I began to piece together. And I went to school in a church basement. So from that point on, I remember going to Sunday school, and I would always kind of look up at the window, like thinking, you know, something bad could happen to me here. So from the time of 8, now why should an 8-year-old be carrying this? But from the time of 8, I began to piece together that perhaps there was something, maybe there was something threatening about the name of Carol. I'm a child, I don't know, you know, too much about the world out there. But also, is there something threatening about both being named Carol and having brown skin and going to Sunday school in a church basement? And so from the age of 8, I became keenly aware that there was something about me living in this body that was threatening and both threatened, and that my life was at stake in certain situations. And so I didn't have language for that, but that began to be woven into my nervous system with this understanding that there was something, harm could come to me because I was living in a brown body. And so I was 8 a long, long time ago. And, you know, so what has been planted and grown because my nervous system has been woven in that particular way.
I think back to having listened to everyone. Think back to Martin Luther King's assassination, murder. It was an awakening. Yeah, I was in high school, so I certainly understood what it meant to kill someone. I certainly understood who Dr. King was to the community that I came from. And to make it even more poignant, Dr. King went to Morris Brown, and I was at Bethel AME Church, and the pastor was Reverend Hunter, and he was from Atlanta, and he knew the Kings, and he had arranged to have the Morris Brown Men's Chorus come to Bethel to sing. And that was so exciting. Plus, I was 16 or 17, and there were all these good-looking young black men, and they could sing. And so I was in church, so I could look at them because mommy knew where I was. I was right there in church, and my friend and I were going to be able to stay out of school the next day to help them get breakfast and whatever they were. I think they were going to have a little tour of the ocean front. And Dr. King was killed. And that ended the day. They got back on the bus and they went back. And I thought, wow, they must know him. They must really be a part of that whole Atlanta thing, which was, I didn't know what that was as a child. But having Dr. King fall, the awareness was that somebody who meant so much to the community that birthed me, held me, supported me, just snatched away. And I had not experienced a lot of death. I come from what was a small family as an only child. There were other family members in the South that I never really met. But Dr. King's death was like, well, that was personal. Well, that was family. And it made me open my eyes and start to think differently. That swung me back to the death of Malcolm X. And as I grew and I studied, especially I'm studying writing and history, the words of Martin King and the words of Malcolm X. People in my growing up did not put them together. They were separate. There was the radical, there was the reverend, but you know what? There was a whole lot of similarity. And I came to start to hear it at that time in my life. The other thing that was really, really powerful for me was the election of Barack Obama. Okay. Yeah, I never expected to see a black president elected in my lifetime. Okay. But that wasn't the point that was so huge. What was huge for me was I loved Barack. I thought that he would do wonderful things and make differences. Well, the first thing is, he did not. And with that came my understanding that, and he said it himself, he was the president for all the people. And what I understood that to mean was there were things that he might have done for black folks that white folks were not going to hear. And so that did not make me real happy. Well, come on, why can't you? We got your back if something happens. We'll give Farrakhan and we'll come out there and, it'll be all right. So I understood then this, because you elect the president and because you believe in whatever values that led you to support that person, doesn't mean that they will always uphold. And there were a lot of things that Barack did in his presidency, the wars, the bombings, the drones. Man, I was ready to say, Michelle, I don't want to make you a widow, but I'm coming down here to get this brother because he ain't acting right. So that was really important. Even I was a woman, but important to understand politics is not about you're happy with everything the person does. You don't have to agree. You don't have to go along to get along. And I really understood that with the presidency of Barack Obama. I still think he was the best looking thing on two legs that ever sat in the White House, okay?
But you know something, just to interject, sometimes as a black person, sometimes you're not able to do some of the things
Right.
that a white person could do. Just like it's okay, like Trump could let people out of prison and forgive them and whatever, pardon them, thank you.
Pardon.
But then if Barack had done the same thing, oh my gosh, look at him, he's letting all black folks out of jail. You know what I mean? So sometimes there's a difference in what you can do, but because of who you are, I'll throw that in too.
And I will take that in on it. Okay. Just imagine January 6th,
Yeah, black people.
black people.
Black people.
And if Barack was president, okay, I'm through.
Black people.
Don't take it from there.
Yeah.
Whatever you
We don't
want to vote.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Girl, we'd have been under the boat.
Back to Africa real fast.
Okay.
That's the issue. You know, it is clear as black and white. It's as clear
It's as
as black and white.
The standard is different depending on how you identify and also how others perceive you as how you identify. And I remember thinking, depending on how you self-identify, when you are seen as other, it's in your spirit and it stays with you and it changes how you interact and how you do certain things. And especially as a queer woman of color in elected office, I know how I move. And I remember someone saying to me recently, to moving forward some project, they're like, you must have the patience of a saint. I'm a black woman. I have to be patient.
I'm still alive, aren't I?
Is it fair? Absolutely not. But there are certain things that my white, cisgender, heterosexual male counterparts can do that I cannot do. And so when we talk about what Barack Hussein Obama Jr. did or did not do in his presidency versus Donald John Trump Jr. And if we talk about what happened on January 6, 2021, if we talk about all these different historical moments, we have to think, and this is why I really enjoyed hearing everyone's perspective about what historical movements touched them, because we all talked about something different, but we saw how much of a monumental impact they made on us all. And it led to us all doing the work that we're doing today. And I think that's why we need to empower everyone that your voice is important. It needs to be heard. And there may be different ways that we preserve those voices. Talk about griots. That's oral history. Just because it's not written doesn't mean it's not valuable. So we have to talk about those things. And we have to stop othering people. We need to start working together. We're more similar than different. I think we all want
that therein is the problem. And that is the fight to make sure, I think it was Lorraine that talked about, or maybe it was Kay that talked about very low income white people having, some of the similar problems. But if I can hold on to whiteness like a gold medal, right, then I can, then it becomes a different situation. Then you can, from what I understand, the word ethnic, actually, the root of that is other. So it's other than whoever it is that we consider to be the dominating group.
Yes,
right?
Because you have your in groups and out groups,
Right.
just like what you said.
Right.
And I think that's so important because I think we all want the same thing. We may have different ways of getting there, but there's a common ground. And how come we are not able to work together? Because just similar to what you were sharing about poor whites feeling that they need someone to be above, similar to caste systems in India. I remember
caste systems here.
I'm trying to be nice.
No need.
Especially in light of this being MLK weekend, he was saying when he was doing his economic justice movements, especially with the strikes and everything, he was telling the poor whites, see, you're having the same issues, why aren't you working for fair wages and everything else? I honestly feel like that's what led to his assassination. And for people to speak so highly of him, I'm like, don't you all remember that he was the most hated man in America when he was alive?
Yes, but most people don't, a lot of young folks.
And that's, and
The last
I would
10
say
years,
that
yes.
helps us go into our next question. You know, a lot of people talk about Rosa Parks being a tired woman when she was an operative. Right? She was an operative, and she wasn't first.
No.
Right?
Yeah, she was
Okay. And because of the time, because Claudette Colvin was pregnant, you know, we could not utilize her as, you know, as the person, but Rosa Parks was a lot more appealing. It's really interesting, when I think of her as an operative, I think of intellect, strategy, working together. But when I think of her as a tired old woman, which she wasn't, it's a different feel, right?
Yeah.
When you think of her as a tired woman, she's this passive, you know, docile.
She's safe.
Right.
Safe.
But when she's an operative, wait a minute, you mean you all planned this? That's a whole different story. And as you said, Dr. King was very hated in his day. And if memory serves correctly, we had the Progressive Baptist Conference because he had to leave, you know, and other ministers that were with him had to leave their conference because they were too radical. So there is, you know, again, like I said, leading to our next question, what is the danger in losing history?
Romanticizing it.
Perfect.
We will glamorize and take things out of the context that they were actually happening. I was watching the lovely fiasco of electing the Speaker of the House recently, and one political party nominated an African American to be Speaker. I don't have a problem with him being African American. I don't have a problem with him being Republican. What I do have a problem is that you are an election denier. And what I do have a problem is your policies. We can disagree on that. But what I really had a problem with is the people that nominated you were quoting Dr. King. And I was like, you are voting for policies and legislation and everything else that were going to keep our people down, and you would have supported it because of your political affiliation. That's what I have a problem with. So I would rather people stop romanticizing people. Don't put people on a pedestal either. As much as I love and honor and respect Dr. King, he was also misogynist. He was also a philanderer, but he was human. Human beings make mistakes. So something that I tell my students and young adults very frequently, please don't put me on a pedestal. Don't put politicians on a pedestal. Don't even put your celebrities and everybody else on a pedestal, because the higher the pedestal, the harder we fall. So do the homework, learn the history, but don't romanticize it and don't try to clean it up and make it palatable. That's what I'm afraid of. If you're going to do the history, you're going to learn the good stuff and the warts and the ugly stuff and the indifferent stuff. I'd rather you learn the whole picture and then you decide for yourself what you want to do with it, than you just get a romanticized, rose-colored perspective and you don't know the full and whole truth.
Well, that's what we've been taught. A romanticized history. That's what's brought us to this moment right now, is to come to a moment of truth in history, because certain people's history have not even been told in the way that we're giving the full story of, you know, people. So it's not even about romanticizing it. It's about now we have to start, we need a whole new movement in education. When it comes to teaching history, it needs to be we cannot continue using these history books that have been written by others who are not telling our story in the way that it needs to be told. It wasn't until I was at Brookdale as a student and took African American Studies with Floresta Jones, that my eyes were awakened and my heart was open to say, wow, you know, this is all of me. This is where I come from. And that is what propelled me to even, I wasn't thinking about going back to school to get a master's degree in history, but it lit a fire in me just to learn about my own history and culture, as Lorraine has talked about. And that is the problem. You know, and Amistad was put in place since 2002. Okay? And I'm gonna just leave that alone.
Right there on the table.
But here we are in 2023. And we still, you know, teachers, I'm gonna be honest with you, many teachers, and these are predominantly white teachers, are fearing trying to even teach history now because they're in an awkward position because they don't know it. All right? They don't know it. And so if they don't know it, they're fearful that they're going to say the wrong thing or whatever because they have not been indoctrinated into the history either. So how are they going to really be able to teach it in the way that's going to be effective? So we're here now, we have to take hold of our stories, everybody, as we said, and we have to start telling our stories and documenting our own stories and writing our books, you know, and we have to challenge this educational system that is set up to educate kids that it is not, and say we have to fight towards a new movement in education.
Well, I have to stop us there because I'm doing a little bit of timekeeping and I want everybody to answer our final question, which is, what message would you like to send to the youth about learning and preserving history?
I can speak.
In addition to learning about world history, U.S. history, I think it's also just as important to learn about the history of your local communities. And that's one of our main objectives and one of my main goals anyway. They need to know about some of the individuals that I had mentioned earlier, but also I think we had the attention on a national scale. People may not realize, well, a lot of people know that we did have Martin Luther King did come and speak at the Asbury Park High School in 1960. But in addition, we also had W.E. Du Bois speak here at the Bangs Avenue School. And of course, W.D. Du Bois is like the first African American to get a doctorate degree at Yale University. You know, and he was an activist, a journalist, a historian, a novelist. He was the founder of the NAACP and editor of the Crises magazine. And, you know, I was doing some research, for example, my father, and then that's when my grandfather, and realized that he actually was, in addition to doing the sand sculptures, my grandfather was also an activist and a public, you know, he did illustrations for the Crisis magazine. And I started seeing in his archives different correspondence where he had invited him to come and speak on behalf of let me see, which group was it? The Lodge. It was a Monmouth Lodge here. So he kind of made those arrangements. But the fact that we even had those kind of connections, and it wasn't just him. William Knuckles, I saw a letter where he had reached out, he being Du Bois, reached out to William Knuckles and said, would you please provide me the information about your business, who's working for you? I'd like to feature you in our Crisis magazine. The Crisis is a national publication. The fact that he would even want to include someone from Asbury Park, that is saying something. So we need to
we need to know those stories and kind of share the stories. And then I also wanted to share that I have been in communication with Edwin Martinez, who is the Asbury Park in charge of curriculum development for the city. And because I've been sharing with him the things we're doing with our museum. So currently we have one on Trailblazing Women of Asbury Park, which covers like the first female doctor from 1800s, Alice Bunce, who was the first African-American pharmacist who graduated from Rutgers, and on. But the next one is on the hotels of Asbury Park, but not just the brick and mortars. Who are the people who worked at those hotels but couldn't actually stay there in the hotels? What are the factors that led to the rapid growth of the hotel industry, the rise and fall? So what we're doing, we're actually incorporating the standard core curriculum elements within our presentation. And some of this may even be made digitally. And I said, well, we could perhaps, they can come to the exhibit, or maybe we could bring it to them. He said, nope, we want to take them out of the classroom, and we'd like them to come and actually visit the museum. So I was excited, the fact that they're open to that. And so the kind of things that you were mentioning, Gilde, is like we need to make sure our history is incorporated in the school system. Well, I think those channels are open, at least within the school district. And of course, some of you are aware of the book that I had written, which was From Amistad to the White House, Teachable Moments from 1839 to Within My Lifetime, which kind of chronicles a lot. It goes back to the history, but it also brings us up to the current history. Black Lives Matter. It's not just the past, it's the past and the present. So when Dr. Repillette was here, he did order a number of those books to be used within our school district. So I think that the seeds are there, there's the reception, but I think collectively these are the things
We have to push it.
Yeah, because there are different levels. So what about the teachers? So we're going to make sure that there are meetings with the departments, because we don't want things to fall through the cracks, because you can initiate those conversations and they'll say yes, yes, yes. But does it actually trickle down? So we may have to do some hand-holding to make sure that it does happen. So again, one of our objectives is to also include the history of our local communities. When I say local, it's Asbury Park and Neptune, because we're really all the same. I barely know where the dividing line is.
All right, we got 10 minutes for everybody else. I'm just letting you know this is the 10-minute warning.
All right, so I'll jump in. So, one of the things that I'm hearing, and when I look at what's going on in the school system, I worked with DC public school systems for 10 years, and I look at what's happening in this school system, and it's a mess. So, where do you jump in? Where do you jump in and so my mind is just going, and perhaps this is something I inherited from my mother, okay, where's the practical application? And I'm thinking, so supporting the work of Kay Harris and her organization, we're supporting the work of Gilde Rogers and T. Thomas Fortune, where we bring kids, to these institutions, and, each light bulb that goes on in the intellect of a young person is extremely valuable, because the masses need to be taught, but we're going to have to reach small clusters of youth initially, and teach them how to be journalists, teach them how to find history, teach them how to become history makers themselves and document it. The spoils are going to go to the people who tell the story, and the other folks have figured out how to tell their stories, get it documented and published. And we have to plant those seeds in our young people, teach them how to go after that. It's not so much your answer, but it's the question that you ask. And that's where the power is.
That's it.
In knowing what question to ask. And I really feel, I know Gilda's skills, and with her skills in journalism, that process of the inquiry, the mind who can inquire, is a skill set that I would like to work on in our young children, so they can even take ownership and pride in that and see a possibility of a future in the story that they can tell by the questions they know how to ask.
I think I'm going to support what you, and lift up what you just said, is asking questions. I think we're so busy with all the different things that we do, we just kind of move through the day, try to make sure that we can make it through the day, but we don't stop to ask those questions. So I think cultivating a spirit of being inquisitive and asking questions, and this is the teacher in me, I don't believe in stupid questions. You're asking the question because you don't know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the question. I really believe that. And also, it's not just learning about local history, state history, national history. What about your own personal history? Mm-hmm. Know who you are. Mm-hmm. I'm still learning more about my ancestry and my background, and I'm in my 4th decade of life. But know who you are. Know what shaped you, what impacted you. By the grace of God, I don't look like what I've been through, but I've been through quite some stuff. But I've taken those lessons, and I believe it's shaped me to become the person that I am today and to do the work that I do today. So it's hard to, as my Catholics remind me, you can't save others if you can't save yourself, but how do you do that if you don't know who you are? So I would encourage everyone, and this is just regardless of age, know your own personal history, but also be willing to ask the questions. And don't let one no stop you, because that may lead you to your yes, or what you need to know. Because that may inspire you to take up an issue or a cause or project that will make history and make an impact. But don't let that one no or that naysayer stop you from moving forward.
If we have ways to bring young people to the history, there is the Asbury Park Museum, which we are fighting valiantly to get a home for. Mm-hmm. We're a homeless museum, but the knowledge, the information, we have a lot of projects, a lot of work that is undertaken. So we may not have a brick and mortar, but we do have exhibits, and those are, we've had one ongoing in the Berkeley Carteret lobby. And we have one right now, still in the Asbury Park Library. So between that and, the T. Thomas Fortune Cultural Center, Gilda must get tired of me saying this.
No.
But it blows my mind. You walk in the front door, and if you step on the first step, those are the original steps. Mm-hmm. T. Thomas Fortune walked up those steps. Mm-hmm. Okay? Young people don't know the history in the community. We have to find a way to bring them to it. The Amistad Commission, Lord, Amistad Commission went on my white list about 20 years ago. Okay, we have not found a way to get the Amistad Commission to do what it has been chartered to do. And when people say to me, well, I say, can you reach out to your school board? Can you reach out to Amistad? There's no guarantees, but we have to reach out and say, this is what we want. These are our children. You are missing the boat. Can you go to a Board of Education meeting? Not an easy thing to do. I think all the board members have fled. There's one. Okay. So, we have to stand up for the children because they don't know. They'll be perfectly happy in school doing whatever they're doing, smoking blunts. And I'm sorry. They may not be doing it in the classroom, but you know, you walk out.
We've all been young.
We have all been young. No shame in that game. We have all been young. And they will do what it is they know that is comfortable. So it is incumbent upon us to bring something new. And it has to be interesting, it has to be exciting. Can't be the same old in those books where they told me that I was happy eating watermelon and slavery is what saved me. Some of those books are still in circulation, okay? Mm-hmm. So we need to understand what our young people are being force-fed and then find other ways to direct them. Susan, you have to direct your question to the moderator. Okay, I'm done.
My question is there African American studies in the high school? I know there is at Brookdale, and I was there when Margaret Parker started them. Is there in the high school now?
That's a very good question.
No.
And why isn't it?
No.
They have a big African American History Month celebration, but you know. I'll stop.
You can't see me over here shaking my head going, where's she gonna try to go with this?
We have time for about 1.5 questions that takes 30 seconds and 30 seconds of answer, and then I need to close up.
My quick
Follow up with her comment. The Amistad Commission dictates that it be followed. However, in the up south north New Jersey, they still don't know the Civil War is over. African American history is American history. It's supposed to be integrated. The curriculum is written, but the folks that don't look like me don't want to deal with it. The Amistad Commission, up until 4 years ago, only had 4 staff members for the entire state. That's not enough to change a dog and take people for a walk, clean up food. So that's what the issue is.
It's no money.
It's history.
It's no money. It's no money really designated either to the Amistad Commission. It's almost like it's a facade. I just hate to say that, but and they have good resources, but if there's no money put behind this commission to go out and make sure these schools are really implementing the curriculum. That's it right there. So they can have the Amistad Commission, but if no one is policing the schools to find out that this is what's being taught, then it's just a place to go to get resources.
We're repeating American history. We're repeating post-Reconstruction, where we lost our voting rights. Black folks, black towns were burnt. We lost our property, businesses, and we're back at that again. Abraham Lincoln was the equivalent of Barack Obama. Post-Abraham came Johnson, who was the equivalent craziness of 45. Now we're back again with the reinvention of the rights that were pulled back. You're trying to pull it back. We're back in the 1880s, 1890s. So we have to be aware. And you New Jersey folk, I'm a Mississippi girl. My parents came up here out of the deep south. They were teens during the Emmett Till era. My grandfather, Medgar Evers, and those folks were down there doing real activism. So y'all would say I'm a troublemaker. Well, it's in my blood. My great aunt came up here because she shot somebody. Because they were messing with her.
Well, I'm sorry, Ms. T. I gotta stop you. And as a descendant of Maroons,
we could
okay. Yes, sir.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for the presentations and everything. And as a student of African American literature and culture, I got to correct this. And I know that what happens to us is that we have all this information in our head. And what's in our head may not be what comes out of our mouth, and I teach, and I catch myself like that all the time. but Du Bois got his PhD.
At Harvard.
From Harvard.
From Harvard.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't want to correct it. It's Harvard.
The Ivy Leagues, and that is important to get it right.
The
Yeah.
distinction is important because all
Yes.
of the New England Ivies, Harvard, Yale, Brown, and Dartmouth, all profited from slavery.
Yes.
Yale accepted African American students as graduate programs long before Harvard did, and the first African American to graduate from Yale with a PhD was a man by the name of Edward Boucher in physics right after the Civil War in 1870s.
Thank you.
And it's a really important distinction between Harvard and Yale.
And actually, I do have Harvard written down, but it's like I didn't have my glasses on and I couldn't remember, but
It's
thank
like
you
I
so
said,
much.
what we
But
have in our
especially
head,
since this is
sometimes
being,
something comes out of our
especially
mouth.
since this is being recorded, it's really important to have all the facts.
Yes.
And
Right.
so I appreciate
Right.
that. Thank you.
I just want to make one quick comment. I'm going to keep it quick, just
Okay,
to
'cause you know
also.
the alarm went off.
Yeah, I know. And no offense, I do not want to stay here tonight. No, thank you. Just to kind of, it's not a full answer, but I want to make sure I address it. Please see what your Board of Education is incorporating their curriculum. And then I also would say, and I'm not here to condone the Amistad Commission, but having being on the commission for the past 6-7 months, I can see where the limitations are and where the opportunities for growth are. So, but this is where I'm going to go back and always say, don't rely on a small group of people to do all the work, because when they get tired and burned out, what's going to happen? You know? So I'm going to empower you, whatever municipality you live in, because we're a home rule state. There are more school districts than municipalities in this state. Ask questions.
Ms. Pam, and may I? I am a lifelong resident of Asbury Park, and at a physical line of Neptune. I am also an educator here in Asbury Park for the past 17 years, between here and Trenton. And in regards to Black history being taught, it's not. In regards to history being taught, it is not. I am put on the sidelines. I am also a special ed teacher. So I'm thrown here, there, and everywhere, where I cannot no longer lead my classes and give these babies their history, as I have done forever. So what I have done is take it outside of the school. Today has been so cathartic this evening. Like you said, thank you. I needed this, because a lot of times on a daily basis, I am ready to throw my hands up. I am ready to go postal in this school system that I work for. But I need my village. I need y'all. We have Black History, as you know, this month coming up in February. Would you be willing to come to our middle school and do this panel? Maybe work it down and meet our children where they're at, but give them this information, because I'm trying, but I'm feeling burnt out. I get down, then I get back up. You know, I get reminded every day that it's my purpose. I understand that, but sometimes I feel like I'm walking alone, and I know that I'm not. But we're like 6 degrees of separation. Everybody, there are others like me out here doing this. There are y'all. I'm reaching out to you on behalf of my school district, like you said. These individuals walked out. What is it that they did not want to hear at the end? You know,
For a short period of time.
What is it that you need?
Well, before we do
Yeah, and I was about to
that,
say, Kim,
before we do that, the public invitation has been made, and we can do some more behind the scenes, you know, to whatever level I'm able. I'm always happy to do what I can to serve and to, you know, to introduce or to represent wonderful people like this. Can we give our panel a round of applause? And forgive me for not doing this in the front end, but I'm happy for her to be here on the back end to really be the close and the anchor. My partner in the Springwood Avenue Rising Executive team, I want to acknowledge Nina Summerlin, who could not be here tonight, who Nina Summerlin, we just say Nina, right? And we know here we're talking about Simone and Summerlin, right? So, but I would like to introduce or represent Diane Shelton to share.
Listen, ladies, thank you. Thank you so much. From all of us at Springwood Avenue Rising, it was powerful. I learned a lot. You're never too old to learn. And I know that you can get with them afterwards. I just want to bring something up. This is our logo in case you see it around. And you know what that is, right?
Phoenix.
Phoenix Rising. That's Springwood Avenue Rising's logo. Because we're focusing on the west side, Springwood Avenue, and I'm also happy to see AP Amp here. But this is how we started. I think she mentioned, because we knew the anniversary was approaching for the civil unrest, what you call civil unrest, all right? But it was approaching. And we did not want to focus on that as much as we wanted to focus on the different businesses that once lined that street. That corridor was, for those who live here, we know what that corridor was. So why am I bringing that up? I just want you to know that we will be presenting before the city council on the 25th of January, Springwood Avenue Rising. We'll be presenting on our proposed plan to do a heritage walk. Okay, we have already started the process. Mama Hugh is involved, there's others involved. But we're looking at, even if it's block by block, putting as many names on that block. We haven't really figured it out, but I just wanted to tell you and wanted to invite anybody who could come support us on the 25th as we present to City Council. We would much appreciate it. Again, thank you, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I'm gonna be here. Panel, we would like to thank you beyond words there. Just thank you. Thank you. You have shared so much. Can we again? And to you, to the audience, a round of applause. I wish we had another 45 minutes to just ask questions and have, conversation. But thank you all so much for being here. You don't know what it means to me. Yes, more is nice, but you were necessary. So that's why you're here. Amen. So I am super excited to see everybody that's here tonight. And we have just a small token of thanks to our panel. So thank you all so much.
Oh my goodness.
So pretty.
You're gonna make me go.
I know, it's so pretty.
Oh my goodness.
So Jennifer,
A little drop of beauty does for the soul. It's medicine. Isn't that gorgeous?
That's beautiful.
I was gonna say, I went to Shrewsbury Avenue AMU. That's where I grew up.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, I just ran into now Pastor Dantele Jones.
Yes. Thank you.